Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba for Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the resident legal diva. And it's time for another Mondays with Melba. So, super excited to have on our elected state attorney for the Orlando Osceola area, which is the Ninth Judicial Circuit here in Florida, Monique Worrell. Welcome back. Always good to see you.
Good morning and welcome, welcome. So good to see you as well.
So here we are. You are not a stranger to the folks in Mondays with Melba Land, but for the newer members of the family, can you please introduce yourself and share a little bit about your journey to this point?
Yeah, so I am Monique Worrell, and it says elected state attorney because here in the Ninth Judicial Circuit, we are in an unprecedented situation in that there are currently two state attorneys here. So I was elected by the people in 2020 on a platform of public safety and reform. And 397,000 people voted for that platform. I won by 67% of the vote. What's really important, though, is that the governor didn't like that. And I learned very early on that it was his plan to eventually have me removed from office. And unfortunately, in August of 2023, that happened. I was removed from office and replaced with an individual who we now refer to here as the appointed state attorney because he was not elected by the people. His number two is actually someone who was an opponent in my primary race and lost. He came in fourth. So when I say he lost, I mean he lost. Like he came in last place in the race. And he was appointed by the governor to be the appointed state attorney's number two. So, again, elected on a platform of public safety and reform to bring accountability to law enforcement. And I believe that that was the single most sticking point that led to my removal because law enforcement didn't want anyone trying to hold them accountable.
Mm.
So here we are. I have filed for reelection and I'm running to become state attorney once again because it is the people who decide who their elected officials are and not the governor. And we have to take back our democracy.
Amen to that. But I want to just go back to something you said because I wasn't aware of this. The governor actually appointed the number two because usually that's a staffing decision that the elected or the appointed, in this instance, state attorney makes a decision as to who their staff is going to be. So why is the governor getting involved? Not only, first of all, period, end of story, he shouldn't have removed you, but
Right.
getting down to that, you put somebody in because you think this person is going to do a quote unquote better job than the person that was elected by the people.
Right.
And now you clearly don't have that much confidence because why are you then basically appointing a whole support staff around him? Like if he had the ability to lead the office and just kind of, do what, if you had faith in this person to move forward and do whatever it is you want them to do, they should be able to have the autonomy to pick their own staff, one would think.
So the only thing I know for a fact is that it was the governor and not the appointed state attorney who chose Ryan Williams to be his number two. I
Hmm.
don't know what the thought process was behind that. I don't know why it happened. I just know that it was him. And what's interesting about that is that after I won the primary, beating Ryan Williams in the primary, I had a meeting with him. He requested to meet with me. And in that meeting, he was positioning himself as my number two. He said that he wanted to be my chief assistant state attorney. Well, at that point, I had already selected a chief assistant state attorney. So I wasn't interested in having him be my chief assistant attorney. But it was Ryan Williams who told me the governor is going to seek to have you removed.
Hmm.
Now, what I didn't know at that time was that Ryan Williams knew that because Ryan Williams was in direct communication with the governor's office. But it would become clear over time because anytime there was anything going on in the office, Ryan Williams was somewhere in the background tweaking other individuals who worked in my office. Ryan Williams, for people who don't know, worked in the state attorney's office that I was state attorney of for the majority of his career. So he had several relationships with several individuals inside the state attorney's office, and he was always working behind the scenes whenever anything would happen. So it wasn't a huge surprise to me that when I was removed, it wasn't a huge surprise to me that I was removed. The governor had been making plays towards my seat for months before it finally happened. But it also wasn't a surprise to me that when it did happen, that Ryan Williams was the individual who was appointed to be the number two. So why not the number one then? That's the question. Why wasn't Ryan Williams appointed as number one? And it was very strategic, I believe, by the governor, because I am a Black woman. And if you're going to take out a Black woman, what better way to split, divide the Black community by replacing her with a Black person? So he needed the number one to be a Black man in order to have any hopes of accomplishing an election by that appointed state attorney in the general election in 2024.
So, let's kind of zoom in on why this is so problematic, because I can see folks
So many
saying,
reasons.
there's so many reasons, right? But I can see folks saying, number one, I don't live in the Orlando area, so my vote wasn't impacted, so why should I care? I can see, I've actually read people saying comments from people where they said, well, doesn't everybody, all the elected officials work for the governor? No.
No.
But but yeah, let's kind of dig into why this is so problematic. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's so problematic is because the entire balance of government has been upset here. And what I mean by that is that government is balanced when you have elected and appointed officials so that no side gets completely ignored in the process of governance. Right. So when you have what we have in Florida here now, which is a supermajority of Republicans in the legislature, and then a Republican governor removing multiple democratically elected officials, not just me. There were several Democrats that have been suspended and replaced by this governor with individuals who are Republicans or Republican leaning. And that upsets the balance because the reality is that's not the Florida voting bloc. And specifically, it's not the voting bloc here in Central Florida. Central Florida rejected the governor in both elections. The
Mm.
people here did not vote for Ron DeSantis. So our elected officials are, for the most part, Democrats. And when you remove Democrats who have been voted in by a Democratic population and replace them with conservatives, you are going against the will of the people. And that's not democracy. Democracy is when people get to vote and they get what they vote for. And the governor imposed on the will of the people. And I will say that this appointed state attorney has imposed on the will of the people. And a question that I want to ask people is that if you can't have a state attorney who respects your voting rights, what other rights will he disregard as he sits in the seat and making decisions on respecting your right to remain silent, your right to remain free from a legal search and seizure? So there are so many things that are implicated by this decision. But getting back to democracy, it is certain appointed positions that are appointed, and there are certain positions that are elected. And that keeps balance in our government so that people who lose the elected position by saying, okay, a Republican won as governor, we are under the governance of a Republican governor until such time as Democrats can elect a Democratic governor. But we can elect our Democratic local officials, the people who are in control of the area that we live in. We can elect them and they will run their sectors of government in the way that is in alignment with our ideology. But what the governor has done is he said, no, I'm going to take that from you as well. Not only am I going to be your governor, even though you didn't choose me, I am now going to go in and start plucking your elected officials that you have voted for because I don't respect your vote.
And that's what's way so problematic is, number one, the respecting of the vote, but also think of the flip side. If you're someone who's kind of analyzing this whole situation and you're like, well, I'm cool with the governor doing that. Okay. Well, would you be cool if it was a Democratic governor that was removing Republican mayors and, Republican state attorneys, et cetera, because, oh, this person isn't aligned with my values? You don't see that happening, right? Like, you
Right.
don't see Democratic governors removing elected officials unless it's a really, really bad situation. The person's struggling with addiction, the person is literally not showing up to work, they're not handling their cases. Those are very rare circumstances. This is not the norm. And
Right.
so if you're not okay with a Democratic governor doing the same thing, then you really shouldn't be okay with the Republican governor doing it. Because I wouldn't be, as a Democrat, I would not be okay with a Democratic governor doing that. Because again, listen, I may not agree, but to me, it's a slippery slope, right?
That's
Once you
right.
start pulling people out of office and doing that, it lowers the threshold, which again removes the right to vote and the voice of the people because they made their statement at the ballot box. This is who we want to represent us. And now you're saying, yeah, never mind. I don't need to listen to that. That's what communism looks like. That's not what
That's
democracy.
exactly right. That's exactly right. And the thing about it is that, we are in a political climate that's extremely polarizing. But people who understand and believe in law and justice, or law and order even, have been able to have conversations with me where they said, listen, I don't agree with everything that you stand for, but I don't agree with what the governor did. Because in a democracy, even if I don't agree with you, it's up to me to vote you out. It's
Mhm.
not up to the governor to remove you and put someone in place who's in alignment with the governor's positions, because that's not what the people of this particular community voted for. So sound and rational people can agree that even if you disagree with my positions as state attorney, even if you don't think that we should find alternatives to incarceration, even if you don't think that law enforcement should be held accountable when they break the law, the line is at authoritarianism. The line is where a elected governor comes in and removes an elected officer simply because they disagree, not because of any of the things that the Constitution really provided for. But now we're twisting and turning the Constitution to try to make it fit neglect of duty. Neglect of duty is, as you mentioned, not showing up to work, not doing my job, going to, some Caribbean island and sitting on the beach for 6 months while someone else runs my office, which doesn't sound bad, but I didn't do it. And and what he's done is he has used no specific example, no court case that he could point to and say, in this situation, you neglected your duty and it led to this as a result of that. But what he did instead was say, you incarcerated fewer people than anyone else across the state. So because of that, you must be neglecting your duty. And I'm going to remove you as state attorney. And the reality is, as state attorney, the American Bar Association has given us a whole guidebook on what the expectations of a prosecutor are and what our responsibilities are. And nowhere in those expectations is maximizing incarceration a part of my duty as a elected state attorney. So the governor basically made this duty up. And because he has a supermajority in the legislature, it's very likely that the legislature will agree with him. And that is where we have gotten into that slippery slope that you speak of, where we've lost our democracy.
So let's pivot back to you specifically and your goals for your next term. I mean, what do you hope to accomplish next term when elected? I'm not saying if, I'm claiming it, when you're elected in November.
So, essentially, I had 2.5 years of my first term. So I didn't get to accomplish all of the things that I stood on my platform and told people that I would accomplish. In fact, just recently, one of the officers that I indicted for shooting an unarmed man, the appointed state attorney did the governor's bidding and dropped that case. In fact, he didn't drop it. The appointed number two dropped the case and wrote a long 30-page memo talking about how, and listen to this, and go find the memorandum if you think that what I'm about to say sounds so ridiculous that it can't be true. But in relying on the officer's confession, I should never have relied on the officer saying that he intended to shoot this unarmed man because his confession was unreliable. And I should have known that.
What?
I know it sounds so ridiculous that it can't be true, but I beg of you, go find the memorandum and read it for yourself, because that's what he's saying. In this situation, it's a case that was on the news, so I'm not disclosing anything that is subject to any sort of privilege. A individual was on a motorbike. He apparently, must not have supposed to been on the bike. He saw the officer saw him, he got off the bike and he began to run. The officer chased behind him into a set of dark buildings. While the officer was chasing him, the young man ran out from around the building and the officer immediately shot him. And then you can see on the body camera video, the officer saying, "Drop the weapon, drop the weapon, drop the weapon, put your hands up. If you move, I'm going to effing smoke you." Well, turns out there wasn't a weapon. You can see from the video, the individual's hands were up the entire time that he kept screaming at him to put his hands up or he was going to smoke him. And he shot him before he did any of those things.
Right.
So in his statement, he said, "I shot him because I had a weapon. I meant to shot him. I shot him intentionally." When given the opportunity to recant and say, "Well, I was wrong and it was an accident," or whatever the thing, he doubled down and he said, "No, I shot him intentionally." So we charged him with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon because you shot an unarmed man and there was never any evidence that there was a weapon by this individual. And everything that we can see on the body camera shows that the individual is complying by putting his hands up when you're telling him to put his hands up.
Right.
So we took it to the grand jury and the grand jury indicted. And
hold on. The grand jury indicted. So this wasn't like an internal decision, because again, for those who may not be aware, there are two paths to a case getting filed. It can either be filed by the prosecutor themselves by reviewing the evidence and deciding, okay, this is the most appropriate charge, or you can go to the grand jury, which is a body of people selected from the community who serve for a finite amount of time, and they look at all the cases and then they listen to testimony from the lead detective or whoever was investigating, and they make a decision whether or not charges are appropriate, and if so, what charge is appropriate. So we have a body of people from the community that looked at the facts of this case and saw fit to charge aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and the office just decided to drop the case.
They dropped the case. They said that apparently the theory of defense was that it was an accident. We had considered the fact that it could have been an accident, but we also had a statement from the officer who said unequivocally, no, it was not an accident. So all we had to go on was the evidence that we had. And the evidence that we had was an unarmed man was shot, and the officer said he did it on purpose. That was the evidence that we had to go forward with. So essentially what the appointed number two said was that because there was a possibility of the theory that it could have been an accident, we should never have gone forward. Now, we were willing to consider it was an accident, but the officer would never say that it was an accident. And when given the opportunity, he doubled down on the fact that he did it on purpose. Why would he have said that if it was in fact an accident? Was he lying? I have no way of knowing that. I can't assume that the officer is lying. The officer said he did it on purpose, so we went forward with those charges. Anyway, these are the types of decisions that are being made under this administration. And these decisions are contrary to the will of the voters, because Ryan Williams was specifically rejected by the voters, losing by having only 6% of the vote. And Andrew Bain, while recently elected as judge, was not elected as state attorney. And these decisions are in alignment with what the governor would do, not what the elected state attorney would do. And the people of this community overwhelmingly rejected the governor, right? So what am I going to do when I'm reelected? I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. Police accountability is very challenging, much more challenging than I thought it was when I was running. There are a lot of times where I personally believe that an officer should have been prosecuted, but we did not prosecute them because the law did not support it. And then when the law did support it, they went and they undid it. So people need to understand that there is a huge stronghold that the police unions have on the legislature. There is a huge stronghold that law enforcement has on the governor's office. And that is to the detriment of the people, because law enforcement has proven, especially by their support of my suspension. And by support, I mean they did all of the background work that was necessary to give the governor what he needed to have some semblance of a reason for my removal, so that they could benefit from having a state attorney in place who's willing to look the other way and not hold them accountable when they break the law. And as I said the first time I ran, we cannot entrust the lawless to enforce the law.
Mm, mm. And if in case folks wanted to see clear evidence that the police unions have a strong hold within Tallahassee, if you think about how last legislative session, there was a whole bill that basically gutted union membership, where basically unions, especially the teachers union, had to change the way that they got members and got a quorum and all of that. And also they couldn't take the dues for the union membership out of direct deposit anymore. Now the people had to literally write checks, and that was just another way of decertifying these unions. The police union and the firefighters union both were exempt from that law. So while all these other unions are struggling to keep their membership, be able to fight for better salaries, better protections, and all of that, the police and fire union are just relaxing, right? So that shows you right there the strength of the police union in Tallahassee. So be that as it may, continue. What other things do you hope to accomplish or finish from your first term? And what
So
do you have
one of
to
the
write
things,
about? Sorry, yeah.
yeah, one of the things that have been key in the appointed administration is maxing out sentences, right? Going for the maximum incarceration period, going for criminal enhancements whenever possible. And that was something that I did not do under my administration, not because I don't believe in public safety. And let me be very clear, our criminal legal system is harsh. It is. The penalties are harsh and the penalties are severe. The enhancements, which are discretionary, double sentences that are already harsh. So if someone is facing 25 years for a particular offense, it's not necessary for us to double that sentence and make it 50. It's just not. We're not accomplishing anything. It doesn't make our community safer. All we are is more archaic in the way we are handling criminal legal justice. Furthermore, we have a lot of people sitting in prison for decades for drug offenses. They are addicts. They are people who sold marijuana when marijuana is now legal to sell, right? And when you go to the prisons and you ask them, what are the majority of the people who are here for? They are here for drug offenses. Now we have fentanyl, and fentanyl is horrible and it's dangerous and it's killing people. But there is a way that you can crack down on the people who are manufacturing and dealing the fentanyl without harming the people who are addicted, the people who are addicted to pain pills, the people who are addicted to cocaine, the people who are addicted to other drugs, and they end up with fentanyl in the drugs that they were addicted to, because that's what the big time drug dealers, that's what they're doing now. And there were methods that we could use to go after the top. But this administration and law enforcement in general insists on going after the bottom. And that is why we continue to lose this endless war on drugs, because we continue to go after the individuals who are addicts or small-time dealers who are dealing just for the purpose of replenishing their habit, and not going after the people who are manufacturing drugs. And by that, I'm wondering, like, are we really trying to stop drugs in this country, or are we only trying to feed our incarceration system? So one of the things that I did not do was maximize and enhance sentences just for the sake of doing it. Did I do it? Yes, I did. when a person was a danger to our community and their sentence needed to be enhanced so that we could keep them out of society for the safety of the public, yes, we absolutely used the tools that we had. But here, they just do it in every case. They just do it in every case. There was a situation recently where an individual was found guilty at trial. I believe the original plea offer was somewhere around 8 years. And then after trial, the state attorney wanted to seek an enhancement, a prison release, reoffender enhancement, and other enhancements that would make that previous 8-year plea offer 25 years after the enhancement. And it was the court that stepped in and said no. The court said, "What was your plea offer before this trial?" And the state had to say 8 years. And then the court said, if you believe that 8 years was good enough for public safety before trial, then it's good enough for public safety after trial. And that is what I've been saying all along. This trial penalty must stop. We give individuals the right to take their case before a jury. And if we believe that a plea offer of 8 years in this situation is sufficient prior to an individual taking their case to trial, then there is nothing about a trial, typically speaking, that warrants us to increase that penalty and sometimes double or even tripling that penalty, right? We do that to be make people afraid to go to trial, and it's retaliation. And that's not justice. So under my administration, that is one thing that I would not allow my prosecutors to do under this administration. It's running rampant, and it's the judiciary that's having to step in and say, no, we're not doing that here. Another thing is just taking a case because law enforcement says it's a case and pushing it through. One of the things that I required under my administration is that if a drug case comes in, we're not going to go forward with that charge until FDLE has verified that the drug that tested for whatever it was in the field presumptive test is in fact that drug. Why? Here in Central Florida, we have 2 cases. One where an individual was arrested for possession of, I think it was meth, and once the test and it field presumptive tested, field presumptive for the viewers who aren't aware of what that is where law enforcement has a kit with them that they can do a test and it tests negative or positive in the field, but that test must be verified by a laboratory. This individual was stopped and they had a substance that field presumptive tested for methamphetamines. Once it went to the lab, it was actually the glaze off of a Krispy Kreme donut.
Stop it. I can't. Stop it. Stop it.
Again, if what I'm saying sounds so ridiculous that it can't be true, please Google it because it happened right here in Central Florida. In another situation, an individual who had been on probation was arrested for possession of cocaine because of a substance found in his vehicle. He sat in jail for months waiting for the field presumptive test to be verified by the lab. Once it was verified by the lab, it wasn't, because it was actually sheetrock because he was a contractor.
Oh my God.
So I required under my administration that we would not push these cases through, that in order for us to move forward on a drug case, it had to be verified by the lab. This administration is pushing plea deals through with these cases, understanding what our history is here, right here in this circuit with regards to erroneous test results. And the Osceola County Sheriff did a press conference a year ago about all of these charges for trafficking and drug substances that he presented to my office, and that we had gone forward on 0 cases. This press conference was later used in the governor's executive order suspending me. However, I said right away that it wasn't true. The Orlando Sentinel has since come out with their own independent investigation showing that it wasn't true. But not only that it wasn't true, many of the cases that this sheriff charged as trafficking, the substance were not illegal substances at all. The individual that they arrested were not the individual who had the substances on them. There were motions to suppress filed that were granted by the court. And yet still many of those cases were still going through the system at the time that he had the press conference saying that none of them had been charged as trafficking cases. So this is the type of dishonesty, manipulation, and uh, struggle that I was dealing with as state attorney with my local law enforcement. And these are the things that I will deal with once again, undoubtedly. But I, as state attorney, will stand for justice. I will not do the bidding of law enforcement. I will not do the bidding of the governor. I am elected by the people, and my job is to serve the people and the people alone.
Amen to that. So, if folks want to support you, learn more, where can they go and how can they do that?
Yeah, so my website is the easiest way to find out all of the information. It is Monique, Monique, for state attorney, FORSTATEATTORNEY. Yes, it is a very long email address. MoniqueForStateAttorney.com. You can also find me on Facebook at State Attorney Monique H. Worrell and Instagram as well.
Awesome. I encourage everyone to learn more about Monique and the work that she's done. I fully support her. I've been, supporting her since the first run. The two of us actually ran for state attorney together in 2020. She was successful. I was not, but I'm just so thrilled and proud of all that she's been able to accomplish and horrified by the fact that she could not at least finish her term and be able to stand before the people and let the people decide whether or not she did a good job. It should not be up to the governor. It should be up to the voters who put her there in the first place to decide whether or not she's earned the right to have another term. I feel that she has, and I hope that y'all join me in supporting her. Definitely like, share, let your friends know. And I will be dropping the link to her website in the comments so that y'all can have the opportunity just to take a look and learn more. So, Monique, thank you. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for all you've done for the people of your judicial circuit, as well as all of us in the state of Florida. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Melba. Thank you for having me. And to your viewers, thank you for watching.
Awesome. Well, everyone, take good care, and I will see you next Monday for another Mondays with Melba. Bye.